Well, my name's Jack Mulcahy, and I first got an idea where Eveleigh was when I was 12 years old. Before I got to Eveleigh, I used to go to a place outside of the central station. It was called a mortuary, and I would sit there and watch the trains shunting back and forth, and their drivers got to know me. And one day one of the drivers came over and said, "Look, I've got some photos, penny plain and tuppence coloured." And I said, "Oh gee, that's great." But I couldn't afford them because penny was a tram ride in those days, and I used to walk in from a place called Kingsford, which was a distance, to save a penny so I could buy a penny pie, which I used to consume while I was up on the Regent Street mortuary station. And it was interesting that a lot of the mortuary station was moved down to a cathedral in Canberra, at the Spire, I think it was.
Yes, I remember the mortuary station. We used to do some filming there also for old.
And I got to know all the classes of engines, and later on, when I was old enough, I got a job over in the carriage works, which was across the way from Eveleigh. And of course, being an engine lover, I would sneak over during lunchtime to have a look at the engines, and the people over at Eveleigh would talk to me, the enginemen and the firemen. And I got to know the drivers there, and I had a great respect for the Eveleigh drivers because they were the top class men. They'd work the Flyer to Newcastle, the South Coast Daylight, the Southern Highlands, the Fish, the Chips. And a lot of these trains were worked by my favourite engine, type of engine, the 32 class. And 36 class was another engine that I liked. And I later on, I decided I would get a job in the railways, which I did over at the carriage works. And unfortunately, one day I took a sickie, and I went back to my haunts at Central, now not the mortuary, but over in the Severn. And I was taking the numbers of the engines and the composition of the trains, and a fella came up and he says, "You work in the railways?" I said, "Yes." He said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Work day." I said, "Yes." He said, "Where do you work?" I said, "Over at the carriage works," and I got sacked. Yeah, because I was absent without.
Was that the end of your association here then?
Well, yes, because I was doing the naughty thing. Later on, I joined the tramways and became a conductor out at Dowling Street, the biggest tramway shed in the Southern Hemisphere.
And when you used to sneak over here when you were a boy, you were received well? There was a lot of camaraderie.
Oh yes, they knew I was an engine. They just spotted me straight away because I was taking the engine numbers and everything like that, and I always could go back to the time before they were classified in the 1920s to class numbers. They used to have all their numbers, like a nanny was a 35 class, a P was a P6 was a 32 class, and a pig was a 36 class. All those sort of things. They sort of adopted me to a great extent, and anything that came around that looked like an official, they'd give me a bit of a buzz.
And are you still a train lover?
Absolutely. I'm an avid collector of railway timetables, both working and public, and they go back to the 1890s. And it was interesting in the 1890s that when you went to Melbourne and changed at Albury, that the passenger from Sydney would be required to change their watches by 5 minutes, because when you're in Victoria, according to Greenwich time, your 5 minutes difference between Victoria and New South Wales. Later on, I believe that they came to an arrangement that the 5 minutes was neither here nor there. And so everybody would be able to stop altering their clock or watch by 5 minutes.
Was there any other story about Eveleigh or your time here at the Carriage Works, or anything that you'd like to share with us?
Well, it was more or less a great nostalgia for me. Particularly when I knew that they were going to be hit over the head because of the diesel, and it was going to be so much cheaper and all the rest of it. And I just feared for the engines, and luckily they saved some of the engines that I love, and it was great to see 3265 back on the tracks again with the nameplate Hunter, which was used originally on the flyer, which was normally called in the 1920s and early 30s the Northern Commercial Limited, but still retained the same number, 21 and 24.